What's up, guys? Shawn, Myszka, and optimizemovement.com coming to you with another quick tip. Today we're going to talk about what some would refer to as a drop step or a false step, or what I would like to refer to as a plyo step, that is if it's done correctly. Okay? As we all know, sport is about time, and decreasing time is always our objective. Every little millisecond counts, okay? That's intuitively obvious. And anything that we can do in a movement pattern of any sort out in the sport domain is going to be of utmost importance to change if we can decrease time. That is, if we can keep it safe and it still be effective. Now, there are some things that athletes do that isn't so safe and it isn't so effective. So those things are things that I would refer to as dysfunctional and that need to be changed. However, for some, the plyo step just isn't one of them. Now, when we talk about the plyo step, okay, or again, some would refer to as a drop step, which I think is maybe inappropriately named, okay, or some would refer to as a false step, which it actually could be if you're not doing it correctly. We can start to look at and investigate the actual task constraints and those things that we may need to change or that could be inhibiting that movement action. But we have to first determine if the actual plyo step that's taking place is not only optimal for that individual, but also if they have the ability to do it repetitively over time and still achieve success, okay? Now, on the surface of that plyo step, some would look at it and say, hey, listen, we're taking a step backwards here, okay? For those of you who don't know what a plyo step is, let me show you it from a couple different angles so you can kind of see what I'm referring to. Now, keep in mind that it could be, depending on the task in sport, it could be taking place out of a staggered stance, okay? So out of a 2-point staggered stance here, or it could be taking place out of a parallel stance in this position. In a plyo step or a drop step or a false step is just the way that it sounds. It's one foot coming back before we would take off and accelerate there, okay? Or if I'm going this way, you can see if I'm going out of a parallel stance, 2-point yet, it would be here. Okay? So really what we're looking at then is first the task at hand. To determine if it's optimal in my mind, we have to see if it's happening naturally. To some individuals, it does happen naturally, and that's why some research has actually shown that this false step, even though on the surface one would think that if we're going from point A to point Z, and that Z point is a linear point, the quickest point is going to be, or the quickest path is going to be that of a straight line, without taking any kind of step backwards because it's taking us further away from our objective, okay? But it happens so naturally to some that I suggest don't fight nature. That's the last thing that we want to do. And instead, we just try to look to find ways to optimize it. Now, how well a plyo step is going to work, or if it's going to be advocated, is going to be determined based on first, the task constraints, like I've already mentioned, but second of all, the individual performing that task and the characteristics that he or she may possess, okay? We look at the starting position first and foremost, and then the subsequent task that that individual may need to execute. Say if it's one of my NFL running backs and he is starting from this position here, we often see that they will take that step backwards before they go and take the handoff from the quarterback. And in that case, they're often putting themselves in a position where they can read the defense, and they're getting themselves in a position where they're still storing energy while they're able to read the defense, and it sets up a greater timing. There are other individuals that we might see in certain sports where maybe the action is happening too quickly, that taking a false step or a plyo step is actually going to be a false step, such as if we're in the back row playing volleyball, or if we might be taking a softball player and you're a shortstop and you have to run to second base to tag someone out after you retrieved a ground ball, you're not going to take a step backwards necessarily to get yourself going to second base if you're the shortstop. And you can see numerous situations. We're not going to explore all of them, of course. I just want you to think about different things in regards to the task to determine if the use of a plyo step is going to be true or false, essentially, okay? What we find is that those individuals who might be more natural plyo steppers are typically going to be those individuals who are more elastic reactive movers. And what I mean by that is those individuals that you see are naturally springy and bouncy, and they have the genetic capabilities or maybe trainability to be able to perform this task more readily or efficiently and safely than, say, someone who's more of a strength or power-oriented mover. That would be someone like myself, typically someone who's a little stockier, shorter, doesn't have the same length of tendon for energy storage that we would see, such as like a rubber band, like on my wrist here, okay? And those individuals typically are going to be better off to not execute the plyo step, even if the task calls for it. But we see the natural movers, those elastic, reactive, bouncy type people that we're all kind of envious of, okay, those individuals are typically going to be a little bit better at this plyo step, and they'll make it true rather than false, okay? The other times that we see that someone who would probably be better at a plyo step would be those individuals who have a super high level of mastery, okay? I would probably not advocate that the majority of high school running backs perform the plyo step and to do that over and over and over again, okay? But what I would suggest for most NFL running backs, because of the nature of their individual characteristics and their level of mastery, is that they do perform that plyo step. And of course, some of it is going to be a tactical demand there too, but these are all things that we need to consider and think about if we're going to perfect or optimize that athlete's on-field in-sport movement mastery. Now, like with any other movement that we look at, whether it's a plyo step or a change of direction oriented task, or even performing something such as the sport task itself, we're always looking at the energy leaks and the common issues that we may see occur, okay? And there's so many little details that we have to look at. But when we talk about energy leaks, we got to think both about the front leg as well as the back leg. Okay, and again, I've already mentioned the starting position is going to kind of dictate that which we have to execute afterwards. So if we're starting here or if we're starting there and then we look at a plyo step, all those things are going to change because we have to look at joint angles and the important components of that kinetic chain. Okay, some common energy leaks that we may see occur in that plyo step that is going to happen. We have to look at all aspects, okay? I'm going to look actually from the head on down. Typically what we find is people who are inefficient movers in this plyo step is when they take that step backwards, is they often get their arms out of position and their arms will abduct, so they'll come out to the side and their center of gravity will actually raise, taking them way too far and off balance and unstabilized to produce the action more quickly and responsively in order to put that force into the ground and go that way, okay? But those individuals who you see who are better at it, when they get themselves from here to there, it looks like a sprinter start, okay? It looks like one where they get to an acceleration. So if we slow it down, the arms don't get back and far and away because that will typically allow us to raise the center of gravity too much and get off balance going backwards rather than accelerating forward. That's a key that we have to look at. We often see it with the chin as well, knowing that sport movement is obviously played with your chin up and not your chin down. Okay, so we can't turn it into a track and field start. Okay. The other thing that we see is that when that occurs, we see all kinds of issues and technical compensations that will occur. We'll drive back into the heel, the toe will go up too far in dorsiflexion because we're going to try to balance too much. Okay. This knee will likely straighten out, especially then when we have to extend forward and try to exert force into the ground. We often don't take advantage of this hip coil. Okay, or hip flexion that has already occurred, because again, it has already started to extend without any forward movement or force exertion actually occurring that will be advantageous to us. In the back leg, we often see the dysfunctional movers in this plyo step get that step too far back. So whether they're coming from here and taking that step backwards, or whether they're coming from here and taking this step backwards, they get themselves off balance and now they can't go anywhere either. Okay, these are all things that you need to look at and start to go right up the chain, right down the chain, meet in the middle, and try to find the biggest compensations that are occurring joint by joint. Once you find those, we can start to look at specialized developmental activities to maybe perform before they actually try to perform the global task. I'm talking about in training here. Okay, so if you typically see that occurring, it's either happening from a movement patterning standpoint simply because that athlete has done it or performed it in that fashion so many times that it's became unconscious, and we have to take a step back, slow down the movement and own it, and allow the athlete to own that movement and to think about that which she is performing. Or we have to look at the actual muscle tendon complex in the joint and what that is occurring through flexion and extension. Okay? These are all things for us to think about, because then our specialized developmental activity, whether we have that athlete perform that movement task over and over and over again in order to get down or lay down a better movement pattern, or if we prescribe a given specialized developmental activity first and then have he or she perform that global task, will ultimately determine how masterful they get with the execution of this plyo drop step. Okay? All big things to think about, but what I'm imploring you here today is to not necessarily frown upon this plyo step, but to actually look at the sport movement demands and determine if it'll be optimal for that given particular athlete based on his or her level of movement mastery and his or her level of qualification and preparedness, and determine if it's optimal to continue to advocate and perform, or if it's something that we should frown upon, or again, if it's something that needs to be optimized by maybe a small tweak to eliminate energy leakage. I thought this was a great topic to discuss. If you have specific questions, because this is kind of a big topic and something that we see happening in sport over and over and over again in all kinds of sports, go ahead and hit me up, Shawn, S-H-A-W-N, at optimizmovement.com. I hope you enjoyed today's quick tip as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. For Shawn, Myszka, optimizmovement.com and Movement Mastery. Till next time, let's all continue to master the art of optimizing movement.